Hello again, Mr. Parker here. In this screencast, this is actually the second segment of the cell unit screencast. The first segment we looked at was the cell theory, the scientists that were involved and what were their contributions to the cell theory. We looked at the idea of what was the importance of the cell theory, and we talked about cell size a little bit. We looked at prokaryotes, eukaryotes a little bit, and then we wrapped up here, as you can see, with the plant and animal cells. Okay, so here was our animal cell, and you can see all the different structures within the animal cell, and we're actually going to talk about those structures of what we refer to as organelles. These organelles have they have a specialized purpose or a function that's going to that a role they play within the cell that helps them run more efficiently. And you can see here in the plant cell, you can see the big difference between those plant and animal cells. If you remember what we talked about a little bit about yesterday, was if you look here, then we have the chloroplasts, we have this huge central vacuole in the middle, and then we also have what they refer to as the cell wall on the outside. Okay, and throughout this screencast, I'm going to try to use a pointer, the color pointer here, to help you, see visualize some of the important issues or important things that you need to really pay close attention to, and then also, some of the key terms that you should definitely be writing down in your 2-column notes. Okay. Hopefully what you have out is your units packet. You should have your notes taking section out. Basically, just like we do in class, where you have the 2-column notes. You have your main ideas on the left-hand side, your supporting information on the right-hand side. That's what you should be doing now when you're watching this screencast. You should be taking notes off it, writing down the key terms, the main ideas, and putting in the supporting information on the right-hand side. So the first thing we're going to talk about today, as you can see here, is the cell membrane. Okay, and the cell membrane plays an important role because what it does is it monitors what comes in and out of the cell, and it's referred to as what they call a phospholipid bilayer. And if you see here, it's actually the layers, it's in 2 layers. That's why they refer to it as a bilayer. And you can look at it here, this diagram. They have one layer here and a second layer here. The 2 outside layers is what they refer as hydrophilic, meaning they like water, and the inside layer is a hydrophobic, just meaning they do not like water. And this is just basically involved. It kind of keeps the cell membrane is referred to as a fluid and mosaic model. It's always in motion, it's always moving. Okay, and you can also see here, these are what we refer to, these big objects here are referred to as protein channels. These allow some of the larger substances to move in and out of the cell, because the smaller substances are actually able to travel through these phospholipid layers without actually having any help with the protein channels. And then they also have up here is this carbohydrate, and this carbohydrate here is actually it's kind of like an antenna. It actually communicates with some of the other surrounding cells, and they're responsible for the communication. So the first thing you should have written down here is the cell membrane. Again, it's found in both plants and animals. And then from there is you should have that the idea here that the cell membrane is the important role of the cell membrane are 2 things. Okay, the first one here, it separates, as you see. Let me go back here. It separates for you basically the inside of the cell to the outside of the cell. Okay, so we have separation, and then also regulates. So it's kind of like the security of the cell. It's like the gatekeeper. It tells you what can come in, what can come out, and a lot of things depend on what the size of the molecules are that are coming in and out, and if they need protein channels to be allowed in, or if they need where they're able to fit through that phospholipid bilayer. Okay, so the cell membrane. Moving on from there is the cell wall. Okay, and we know, okay, from some of your work you have done with your booklets and some of the other information, is that the cell wall is only found here, okay, in plants, algae, and some bacteria. All right, so it's only found in plants, algae, and some bacteria. The cell wall helps in support. Okay. Sorry, it helps in support and with the idea of protection. Okay, so again, this is when we're talking about plants. it provides the rigidity or the structure for the plant so it stands upright. Okay, our cells and animal cells don't need that necessarily. Okay, and then also it's the protection. It helps regulate also what comes in and out of the cell. So so you have the cell membrane. Now we have the cell wall, and again, this is only for plants, algae, and some bacteria. Now we're taking a look at the nucleus. Okay, and the nucleus is actually made up of 3 different parts, so you do definitely need to know that. So I would definitely write that down. Okay, so the nucleus is what we're looking at. It's made up of 3 parts. We have the nuclear envelope, we have the nucleolus, and we have the chromosomes. Okay, and these are found both in plants and animals. The nucleus is, and this structure, you look here, this whole entire structure here is the nucleus. We have the nucleolus in the middle. Okay, that's where your RNA is going to be made up of. Your chromatin is basically the precursor to chromosomes, and you can kind of see they give you some microscopic views of what they are. So again, you've written down, you got the nucleus, and it's made up of 3 parts: the nuclear envelope, the nucleolus, and the chromosomes. And we're going to go through each one of these and what their importance or what their role is in the cell. Okay, so a little bit more about the nucleus. We like to say that the nucleus is basically it's the information control center of the cell. Okay, the nucleus contains the DNA, the genetic material that holds the coded instruction for making thousands of different molecules. Your DNA, if you remember, we talked about it in class the other day. DNA is made up of 4 different letters or molecules. You have your adenine, your thymine, guanine, and cytosine. And the adenine is always bonded to thymine, and guanine and cytosine are always bonded together. And that's the basic, the alphabet that makes up your DNA. And actually, the DNA letters or molecules are the same amongst all organisms. It doesn't matter what type of organism you're talking about. Alright, and it directs all the cell's activities. Now a little bit more about the nuclear envelope, and if you remember, it's very similar to the idea of the cell membrane, in that what it does is it regulates, okay, it's for protection, but in this case it actually surrounds the nucleus instead of the entire cell. And so your nuclear envelope here is what allows excuse me, it allows what comes in and out of the nucleus. Okay, so this surrounds the nucleus, it separates it from the rest of the cell, and you can see it contains these pores or small openings that allow certain molecules to move in and out of the nucleus. And in particular, what is going to have to leave that nucleus is going to be the genetic information. Now, it's not going to be your DNA that leaves the nucleus, okay, but it is going to be your RNA or messenger RNA, and we'll get into that later about the importance of that. The second part here that we had talked about, what makes up the nucleus, is the nucleolus. And if you look at this drawing here, okay, that you can see here, this is the entire nucleus out here, this image, or the darker circle, and then here we have the nucleolus. Okay, and the nucleolus is responsible for the production of what we have here are the ribosomes. Okay, so you should have jotted down the nucleolus, and make sure you have put down there production of proteins. Okay, or sorry, it's where the production of ribosomes. Ribosomes actually make the proteins. Then later on we'll talk about those. Okay, so you have the nucleolus, and it's the making of the ribosomes in that particular area. Now a little bit, the last part of the nucleus, okay, so again the 3 parts we've talked about is the nuclear envelope, the nucleolus, and now we're talking about the chromosomes. And what do the chromosomes do? Well, the chromosomes are small thread-like structures made up of proteins and DNA molecules. The particular protein is called a histone protein, and the DNA molecules are actually tightly wound around these molecules, the histone proteins. They're wound around these proteins so tight that they actually fit in about 6 feet of DNA within one of your nuclei. Okay, so it can take you think about all your cells that actually have nuclei. They actually have about 6 feet of DNA stuck in there. Okay, so what happens here is you can see these blue kind of ball-like structures. Those are the histone proteins. You can see the DNA is wrapped around it. Now it's unwinding. Okay, and before it becomes DNA, it's what they refer to as chromatin, and these chromatin is found on the chromosomes. Okay. And what it does, again, your chromosomes contain the genetic information, the hereditary information that is passed along from one generation to the next. So chromosomes, you should know, contains your DNA, thread-like structure, has your genetic information that you pass along. Now the cytoplasm, okay, so this is another one of your key terms that you should have written down. Your cytoplasm here is what all this yellow structure in here, all the yellow, it's kind of like jelly-like substance. You can see all the yellow here, and that is all your cytoplasm. Okay, and basically your cytoplasm is jelly-like fluid made up of water and chemicals that fills the interior of the cell and hold the cell's organelles. So what if I was writing this down and taking notes, I would write down cytoplasm, and then I would put jelly-like fluid, and then I would say it would that it holds all the cell's organelles into place. Okay, that's what I would write down. Jelly-like substance, and it holds all the cell's organelles into place. Okay, and here we have all eukaryotic cells contain special structures called organelles. All right, and so we've talked about some organelles, and we've talked about them in class. So you should know this term here, organelles. So make sure you're jotting that down, organelles. Okay, and what an organelle is, basically, it's a special structure that carries out a function within the cell. Okay, so organelles, as it says here, organelles do work for the cell. And you can see here some of the organelles that are labeled, and these are all important, and they play an important role in the cell's normal daily functions that go about. Okay, the power stations of the cell. You should kind of think of this, and you remember from some of your background work you've done in the cell quest, you probably could remember what this is. A lot of people have seen this before, but all living things require energy. So we know we talked about this in the characteristics of life in that section back in August, when we said we know all things require energy to carry out just the normal processes that throughout their daily lives. Energy comes from the sun or food substances, okay, depending, right? It depends if you're a plant or if you're an animal, right? This energy is made available to cells in the two forms. Okay, so we have mitochondria and the chloroplasts. Now, the mitochondria is going to convert that chemical energy for us into a molecule. The energy molecule is called something ATP. Okay, that's the molecule. And in chloroplasts, these are found in just the plants, and their production is they're able to make their own energy for themselves by using the sunlight. So we as animals, we have to consume energy. Plants are able to produce their own energy through the ideas or through the structure called chloroplasts. Okay, so you're looking at here, your mitochondria are found in both plants and animal cells. All right, and they're kind of showing you, it's kind of like this bean-like looking structure. Okay, so you should have jotted down mitochondria. Make sure you write down that they're found in both plants and animals. All right, and make sure you've put down that they are like the powerhouse of the cell, and they make a chemical or a molecule called ATP. All right, and this is the image they always give you kind of in the textbook, and this is what it kind of really looks like if you're looking at it microscopically underneath the microscope. Okay, some more images here for you to take a look at. And so this is the powerhouse of the cell. I always think of it, you think about mitochondria is like the mighty part of the cell. It produces the energy that was required in order for the cell to do its normal thing. And as I mentioned here on the bottom, okay, so mitochondria on the bottom here tells you if you here's your ATP, that's the molecule that's made. All right, and this is the cellular energy molecule, and remember that this is the powerhouse of the cell. So mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell, and ATP and the cellular energy molecule. Now the chloroplast, which is found only in plants, okay, and you can see some of the different structures of kind of how it looks. All right, and these are found only in plants, and and you can kind of see that there and what the structure looks like. And as we say here, organelles are found only in plants, algae, and some bacteria that contain the light-absorbing pigment chlorophyll. So in your notes, okay, another main idea is going to be chloroplast. Okay, and know that they're only found in plants, algae, and some bacteria. They have what we call a pigmentation called chlorophyll in it. That's basically what they absorb the light. Okay, and this photosynthesis occurs here as plants convert solar energy into the food substance called glucose. So again, chloroplasts, found in plants and algae and some bacteria, have chlorophyll. This is where photosynthesis occurs, and they convert that solar energy, right, solar energy into food substances, and what they use is glucose. And we've talked about this a number of times in class, that they store it. If they don't use all that glucose, they store it as starch for later use. So that is a chloroplast. Alright, ribosomes. We saw this term a few minutes ago when we were talking about the nucleus, and we talked about the three different parts of the nucleus: the nuclear envelope, the nucleoid region, the middle parts, and the nucleolus, and then we also talked about the chromosomes. Now these ribosomes, if you remember, they are made in the nucleolus. Okay, let me go back here, sorry. They are found in both plants and animals. Okay, so you should have a key term again. You should have this written down, is ribosome, found in plants and animals. And what they're showing you is this is a microscopic image that they have taken underneath the microscope. And what you can see here, this is what we refer to as an endoplasmic reticulum, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. This helps in the transportation of materials throughout the cell. Okay. You can see those here, and what you can see, all these little black dots are ribosomes, and if they're attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, they're referred to as the rough endoplasmic reticulum, and if there's no ribosomes attached to them, they would refer to it as the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So these ribosomes could be attached, or they could be free floating, like you see them all over here, all the different black dots, and those are all areas that our proteins are going to be made. So your ribosomes, the function of them, okay, ribosomes are cellular structures, and they play a role in protein production. Okay, so this is outside the nucleus. Okay, what happens is that DNA that's in the nucleus turns into, or translates, or transcribes into to messenger RNA, and the messenger RNA leaves the nucleus and goes off into the ribosomes, and then your proteins are made in this particular area. Okay, so you can see ribosomes are either free in the cytoplasm or they're attached, and you can see them floating around here, or they're attached to the endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, if you remember previously we talked about the mitochondria. Here's your nucleus, here's your nucleolus in the middle, and your chromosomes are also found within here, and then your ribosomes are all around, and that's where your protein production is going to be made. Okay, so those are some of the main structures initially that we look at. Okay, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about basically what we call the cell highway, or the endomembrane system. Okay, and I have been mentioning the terms endoplasmic reticulum before, and this is kind of a blown up view, and you should recognize those black dots as being the ribosomes, and that's where the protein production is going to occur at. And we're going to go into some of these structures that are basically involved in the movement of materials throughout the cell. That's why it's called, or referred to as, the highway of the cell. Alright, so the first one is the endoplasmic reticulum, and a lot of times, as you can see here, it's referred to as the smooth ER or the rough ER. Now again, we've mentioned this before, but the smooth ER here basically means there's no ribosomes attached to it. And you can see here with this arrow, these have no little dots attached to them. Now the rough ER, okay, if they do have ribosomes attached to it, they're referred to as the rough ER. And you can see here in this image, you can see all the black dots, so those are going to be your rough ER, and then you will have some that will be smooth ER. And your endoplasmic reticulum is basically a network of membrane sacs that transports materials through the cell. Okay, so this is what we refer to as the highway system. So in your notes, you should have jotted down endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, and no, there's two types, smooth ER and rough ER. They're both found in plants and animals. Okay, but they and they're responsible for moving things throughout the cell. Okay, as I mentioned, there's your two different types, your rough ER and your smooth ER. So make sure you got those down, and we're going to visit both of these a little bit closer so you have a little bit better understanding. So the first one here is your rough ER. So here you go. Here's your microscopic image underneath the transmission electron microscope. You can see here's just our rendition of it, a computerized rendition of it. And the job of this, or what is this responsible for? Basically, your ER is covered with ribosomes, and this again is involved in the synthesis and the chemical modification of the proteins. So your rough ER is going to help the movement of these materials in and throughout the cell, and particularly it helps in the movement of those proteins that are being made within the ribosomes. They're all attached to that. Your smooth ER, okay, you can see here there's no ribosomes attached this time. You don't see any of the black dots within this image. Okay, so this is going to basically be responsible for, this is where your enzymes and special biochemicals are stored in the smooth ER, and then when they need to get moved through the cell, they move through the endoplasmic reticulum. So initially they get stored here, and eventually they get moved out from here. Alright, so now looking at the Golgi apparatus, and sometimes you might see it or referred to as the Golgi bodies. Okay, these are found in both plants and animals, so hopefully in your notes you've already started jotting down Golgi apparatus, and I would put in parentheses Golgi bodies, or bodies after apparatus too, because depending on what book you look at depends how they refer to it. Okay, so you can see this is kind of the computerized rendition of what it looks like. Okay, and then here is what you actually see it looks like underneath the microscope. Okay, so I'm giving you two different images of that. Okay, so Golgi apparatus. Or again, as I mentioned, it refers to as Golgi bodies. Excuse me. This is responsible for the modification, the collection, the packaging, and distribution in molecules made at one location of the cell and used at another. Excuse me. So what I would say, I always refer to as, it's kind of like the distribution hub. It's kind of like the UPS center of the cell, where everything's going to go there to get packaged up and shipped out. And it's going to use the endoplasmic reticulum to ship them out, but this is where the packaging and distribution of all this stuff is put together, put it in the box, and then they ship it out. So your Golgi apparatus is basically the modification, collection, and packaging place of your cell, and that's what it's responsible for. Okay, the next structure that we have here is what we refer to as the lysosomes. Okay, so make sure you have jotted that down in your notes. Okay, so we have lysosomes. Again, it's found in both plants and animals, and it contains these digestive enzymes that can digest substances in the cell, such as foreign materials and worn out organelles. So I like to refer to as the lysosome as the digestive system of your cell, the garbage disposal of your cell. So anything that's not supposed to be there or is not working properly, the lysosomes are there to get rid of it. Okay, they're usually circular structures, as you can see here, a bunch of different lysosomes here, and you can see here also you have your lysosome. Okay, and again, they're responsible for these enzymes help break down this material that's no longer useful for the cell and get rid of it and get it out so the cell can run efficient. Okay, so here's again just kind of looking at some of the things that we have talked about. Here's our, if you remember, our smooth ER. Okay, remember that's going to store some stuff and then ship them out. And we have our nuclear envelope that's responsible for things coming in and out of the nucleus. We have the nucleus that's responsible, that has the DNA. Remember, the nucleus has three different parts to it. It's the nuclear envelope, it's the chromosomes, and it's the nucleolus in the middle, and that's where your ribosomes are going to be made. And then you have your rough ER. And your rough ER is again responsible for moving these proteins, because these ribosomes are attached to the rough ER, and that's where your protein production is made. Your Golgi apparatus or Golgi bodies are referred to, remember that's the packaging and distribution hub of your cell. And then we have our lysosomes here, and these lysosomes are again responsible for killing off or digesting or with some enzymes the cell organelles or foreign materials that should not be within the cell at the time. Okay, we have a couple more here structures we're going to talk about. We had talked about the plasma membrane, which is also referred to as the cell membrane. It's that phospholipid bilayer, things that allow things to come into the cell for protection. And we're going to take a look here next at what we call the vacuole. Okay, so your vacuoles are found, they're actually found in both, but the vacuole is very large in plants. Okay, you can see here. Here's this whole entire structure here is a plant cell, and it has the cell wall on the outside. You can see the chloroplast it's showing you here, and this whole thing here is the central vacuole. Okay, so the central vacuole is very large. Okay, they are found in both, but typically they're harder to see in the animal cell because they're a lot smaller. But your plant cell has this huge central vacuole, and you can see the structure here in representation and respectively of the whole entire cell itself. So the vacuole should be the main idea. What's its responsibilities? It's for cellular storage. Okay, what you can see here are the different things. You have storage tank for water, salts, proteins, and carbohydrates. So this is, if you think about, why does your plants wilt at home? Okay, well, it's because that vacuole gets emptied out. So plants have a large central vacuole to hold water. The pressure of the water helps to keep the plant upright. Okay, so this vacuole, once it fills up, it's able to stand upright because of the amount of pressure that actually builds up within the cell. So again, your vacuole is responsible for the storage, okay, that's found within the plant cell. All right, two more here. We got a couple more items to go through. We're talking about some of the organelles and stuff. We have what we refer to as the centrioles, and these are found only in animals. And we have cytoskeleton, and these are found in both plants and animals. Okay, and we're going to visit both of these in the next couple slides here. But what you see here, so again, you should be writing down centrioles found in animal cells, and then another main idea is cytoskeleton. These are found in both plants and animals. And this is here, you can kind of see what the structure looks like of the centrioles, and they're made up of these small, what they refer to as microtubulars. And you can see here how it looks like underneath the microscope. And then we have the cytoskeleton, and you can see what it looks like here. It's made up of these bunch of these small, what we call microfilaments, kind of for the structure of the cell. So first off, the cytoskeleton. Okay, the cytoskeleton is a tiny network of tubulars that support the cell structure and drive cellular movement. All right, so if you think about, in our body, we talk about our skeleton, right? Well, when we're talking about cytoskeleton, if you remember when you break the word up, cyto meaning cell, skeleton meaning the structure within the cell, and what these tubulars do is they provide structure to the cell. Okay, so these microtubules provide the support for cell shape and help move organelles, so there's movement involved, and play a special role in cell division by forming these centrioles. Okay, so the cytoskeleton, it's the support structure for the cells. It's involved in support for shape, movement of the organelles, and then also for forming these centrioles. Okay, and the centrioles on the next slide here, the centrioles are responsible, as it says, for the ideas of when we're talking about meiotic cellular division. Okay, what we're talking about is mitosis, and these centrioles are responsible. What will happen eventually is these fibers or these microtubulars will actually start these will actually start forming what we call spindle fibers, and they will be responsible for the pulling apart of chromosomes during mitosis. Okay, so those are your centrioles. So the centrioles are formed from your cytoskeleton. Okay, so these are, looking at this is an animal cell, because if you look at it, you can see here the shape and then this is going to be your plant cell, and you can see because you have the huge vacuole, you have the chloroplast. So what I would do is, if you could print this off, this little page, or at least in your notes, I would go through and then say, all right, what is number 1, and label it. What is number 2? What is 3, 4, 5? And see if you can label all the parts from what we just talked about. We talked about all the different labels here. You should be able to label them. And then in the plant cell, the same thing. You should be able to label these. So in your notes, what I would like for you to do is first do this cell, and go ahead and label them. So put number 1 in your notes and say what it is. Number 2 and label it. And in class, we could go through it, or earlier before class, we could discuss if your labeling was correct. And then do the same thing for this one. Okay. The next thing we will start talking about is how things move across the cell membrane. And we talked a little bit about the cell membrane when we were talking about all the different organelles. Okay. So hopefully through this screencast that you have gotten some good notes on the different organelles, the different specialized parts have a function within the cell, and what their actual function is. So you need to go through this again if you haven't gotten all the different parts down, gotten their structure and function, and you definitely need to know these things. They're very important for the whole process of how the cell works and why it works and why it's so efficient. Okay, so again, this was the second segment of the screencast for the cell unit, and they'll be moving on to a third segment here to follow soon.